Hello, I'm Pastor Todd from West Lonsdale Baptist Church, and we're so happy that you've chosen to listen to this podcast, which features this week's Sunday sermon. We hope that you find in it hope and love. We hope that if you have a relationship with Jesus, you find encouragement and growth. If you don't know Jesus, we hope that through the words that we speak on Sundays, you will find relationship with Him. Because above all else, Jesus loves you, gave His life for you, and wants relationship with you. Listen now to this week's sermon from West Lonsdale. Thank you all for being here this morning. We're so thankful that you're here. For the next few weeks at least, I'll be sitting while I speak. My doctor has approved me being up here. I'm not breaking the rules. I checked with her last week, and she was good with me being here. They would prefer me sitting for just a little bit just because I still get pretty tired pretty easily, and they don't want me up just moving around a lot. I still don't do much. I sit around the house a lot. I go to cardiac rehab 3 times a week, but things wear me out real quick. I'll feel great 1 second. I'll be like, man, I feel like I'm back. And then a few minutes later, I'm like, I'm just going to take a nap. And so it just kind of builds. But I want us to understand something today. And as we go through these next 2 weeks, we're doing a short series called Our Stories. And we're going to be talking about how our stories are significant in the lives of others. Many times we think things like, oh, well, that's just my story. Nobody would care about that. But the reality is that our stories are very instrumental, pivotal, and powerful in the lives of other people. And our stories are the gateway for people to Jesus. It's the story of our life, but more importantly, it's the story of salvation to glory. Our salvation to the moment that we stand before Jesus compiles a story that's compelling to other people. And the moments in between salvation and glory, that's what comprises our story in Jesus. And so as we share those chapters that we're writing in our life story, they become very persuasive in the lives of other people. And those chapters are full of God's goodness, our brokenness, and the reconciliation of the two. And that's where the power lies, is in the reconciliation. Now, some of our chapters are more filled with God's goodness, right? Some of our chapters are just overflowing with God's goodness. Some of our chapters are more about our brokenness, right? We all have those moments where just our brokenness shines through, and all of those shortcomings and failures and all of those things eat up that chapter. But aren't we glad that a book or a movie or a great story isn't just comprised of one chapter, but it's the compilation of all the chapters? I mean, my goodness, if it wasn't for the complete story, Han Solo would still be frozen in carbonite. And for those of you that aren't Star Wars fans, let me explain. One of the heroes of the story in the second movie at the end is put in a state of frozen animation, right? He's frozen in a made-up substance called carbonite, right? And that's where the story ends in the second movie. Really, it's the 5th movie, but that's a whole other complicated formula. But it's okay, because in the 6th movie, the story continues, and he doesn't stay there. Instead, his family, Leia and Luke, rescue him from that moment. Now, if we stay in The Empire Strikes Back, if we never watch The Return of the Jedi, then in our minds, he's always in that state. But because there's a whole story, we get to see the salvation arc. And in our lives, that meeting point of God's goodness and our brokenness create that penultimate story of God's overcoming ability of our shortcomings in life. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at that, and we're going to examine the power of our own stories. Now, I do want to say before, today we're going to look at my story. But I do want to say before we do that, I recognize that my story is not unique. There are elements of it that will be unique, but it's not unique. And I recognize that many people in our church have been impacted by the same thing that I've dealt with over the last few months. So I just want to say real quick before we start, if you're in the room and your family or your life has been impacted by heart disease, heart attack, or open heart surgery, would you just lift your hands, whether it's you or someone in your family? Look, I mean, this room is filled with people who have been, thank you, you can put your hands down. This room is filled with people that have gone through the experience that I have, whether it was in the first person or whether it was in a supporting role like my wife has done, or whether it's in a family role like my parents and my kids and my sister have done. My story's not unique in that it is very much impacting lives throughout our congregation. But I feel like in my position, there can be hope and joy found for you all knowing what I went through and how I went through it. And I think you guys will learn that the way that I went through things is not much different than the way that you go through things. And I hope that's an encouragement to you today. And so I asked Derek to join me up here today for several reasons. One, I love Derek very dearly. Two, I respect the man and the father that he's become. And three, Derek's got a story of his own. And him being able to sit here today and do this is incredible in and of itself, Derek. And so I love you, and I appreciate you. Told you. It's going to be an emotional day. One of the byproducts of this surgery, and I know Tommy's standing right there, he can attest to this. Your emotions are an absolute wreck. They have no answer for it. Your emotions are just a wreck. I thought I was broken. I thought I was messed up. Thank you, Jeff. Sorry, laughing is still hard. I thought I was broken. I thought I was messed up. I started doing Google searches. By the way, if you're ever sick, don't do Google searches. It's not helpful. And I found out everybody does it. Everybody struggles with sleep. I couldn't sleep the first 2 weeks that I was at home. I was sleeping like 2 hours a night, and I couldn't do it. I would just lay in bed, and my mind would just race. You're an emotional wreck. Like 1 minute you're great, and the next minute you're just sitting there crying. And somebody will say, "Why are you crying?" You'll be like, "I don't even know. I'm just overwhelmed." And so today we'll probably be emotional. It's already been emotional for me. Jeff chose the music today, and we didn't talk, we didn't consult, but one, I have two favorite hymns. One of them is How Great Thou Art. And two, music has been very pivotal in my process. Leanne immediately started putting together a playlist for us to listen to, and it grew over time. It started with like 4, 5, 6 songs, and now I think it's up to like, I don't know, Leanne, is it like 42 songs? Something like that. And so music's been very pivotal in my journey through this. And one of the songs was the last song that we sang, which is by Elevation Worship and Chris Brown. And it has been very pivotal in my walk. There's about 5 songs on that list that every time they come on, I'm just overwhelmed because they speak so clearly to what God did in my situation. And that song was one of them. So as soon as it started and the words popped up on the screen, I was just like, okay, Lord, I got you. And so the way we're going to do this today is Derek and I have compiled some questions. Derek's going to ask me some questions. I feel like it's the easiest way for us to get the most information out instead of me just bopping around and giving you some things. And then if we get through it in a timely manner, then we're going to open it up and let you all ask some questions if we don't answer those questions. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So Derek, have at it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So the first question I have is, prior to your heart attack, did you have any idea anything was going on specifically with your heart?
So I knew something was going on. For about 6 months prior to my heart attack, I wasn't feeling very good. I was extremely lethargic. I had extreme lack of energy. I was tired all the time. At first, I thought it was my blood sugar because again, most of you know I'm a type 2 diabetic. I thought my blood sugar was out of whack. So I started tightening up my diet, gotten a little loose on my diet. Most of you know that or many of you probably know, I wasn't on medication for my diabetes. They took me off my medication. I was regulating it with diet and exercise. Now, a couple of things. I do have a degenerative back, so exercising was becoming more difficult. I also, in a state that I'm not very proud of, during COVID, did a push-up contest with my sons, which is not unusual. I always did push-up contests with my sons, and I always beat them. And I beat them in that push-up contest. And then one of them got on the other's back, and they started doing push-ups with each other on their back. And I said, well, I can do that too. So I put one of them on my back, the lighter of the two. At the time, that was Dylan. Went down once, and that was it. I tore up this left shoulder. And so I've not had anything done about it. And so exercise was pretty difficult. So I'd laid off on exercise a little bit. And I'd loosened up on my diet a little bit. So I thought maybe the fatigue, it felt a lot like it did when I was first diagnosed as diabetic. So I thought, well, maybe it's just that. So I started kind of tightening up my diet. Nothing. Felt the same way. Somebody suggested, hey, get your testosterone checked. Your testosterone could be low. So I had my testosterone checked, and one doctor would say it's low, another doctor would say it's not low. But they went ahead and put me on some testosterone shots just to try and get my energy level up. I took them. I tried to convince myself I felt better, but I just didn't. I was still just tired and lethargic and worn out. So I knew something was going on. I had no idea it was my heart. That was the last thing in the world I thought. I've always been, there was a few years in my life, Leanne and I would say 5, 6, 7 years, where I was heavier than I probably should have been, but never just overweight. I've always been in decent shape. I've always been athletic. I've always tried to be active. But I guess years of Reese Cups and Mountain Dew catch up with you at some point. Those Big Mac contests or Whopper eating contests I used to have with my friends in high school caught up with me at some point. Interestingly enough, they say doctors now believe that the majority of the arterial issues that you have as an adult begin when you're 16 and 17 years old. Yep. So take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself. So yeah, I knew something was going on. Never in a million years would I guessed it was my heart. It's never. So
what was it like mentally and spiritually on July 27th?
Yeah. So July 27th was my day. I actually woke up during the night, early morning of the 27th. I'd gone the night before to Chris and Courtney's rehearsal dinner. I was supposed to do their wedding on Saturday. We'd had a great land. I'd had a great night. We were just talking and singing on the way home, making plans, future plans. I'd had about 5 nights in a row. I'd had a heartburn. Heartburn was nothing unusual for me. I'd become used to heartburn. Let me say that. I've not had heartburn since my heart attack, really. For a few days afterwards. But it turns out it was an indicator. And I'd been going through it and I didn't realize it. I'd just gotten used to taking Tums. It was every few days, maybe once a week. It was after I'd eaten, something spicy or something like a barbecue or something like that. We had barbecue at the rehearsal dinner. So when we got home, I told Leanne I have heartburn. Took some Tums, went to bed, no big deal. Woke up probably 4 o'clock in the morning. I could be a little off on my time, but probably 4 o'clock-ish in the morning. Sat up, sat there for a few minutes, and I was having some pressure in my chest now, heartburn and pressure in my chest. And I immediately knew something was wrong. I didn't want to necessarily admit it, but I knew something was wrong. So I actually Googled, what are the symptoms of a heart attack? And I'm sitting there on the edge of the bed reading my phone, and Leanne wakes up and says, "What's the matter? Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." While I'm reading what are the symptoms of a heart attack and going, I've got those. I said, I don't feel great. I've got a little bit of heartburn. She said, "Well, let's see if we can treat that real quick. Let me go down." I said, "Well, you go down and get me some chocolate milk," because I was out of Tums and I just ran out of Tums, and chocolate milk helps as well. So she went and got me some chocolate milk. I drank it. I said, you just go back to bed. I'm fine. If it's not, I'll wake you up." So she laid back down. She didn't go to sleep, but she laid back down. I pretty much forced her to. And I got up and walked around for a few minutes. About 10 minutes later, I went and woke her up, and I said, we need to go to the hospital. Something's not right. And the pressure had begun to increase. I was having uncomfortability down my left arm. I wouldn't call it pain, but it was uncomfortable. It wasn't normal. And my brain just kept telling me, don't go back to sleep. Don't go back to sleep. Something's not right. Go to the hospital. And one of the symptoms, or one of the indicators of a heart attack is actually an impending sense of doom. People have that in the process of a heart attack. And I didn't necessarily have an impending sense of doom, but I had a voice telling me, this is not right. You need to get it fixed or it's going to be bad. So mentally, it became very difficult. And I'm going to talk a lot about the mental side of things today. Mentally, it was tough because one side of me thought, this is going to be fine. Matter of fact, on the car on the way to the hospital, I said two things to Leanne. One was, what if I get there and they just tell me, you got heartburn, go home? And we pay, our copay at the time was like $1,500 for an ER visit. I was like, and we pay $1,500. That's government insurance for you, Kathy. It's government insurance. I was like, we pay $1,500 and they tell me to go home. She's like, well, it'll be $1,500 well spent to know you're okay. And the next thing was, I said, whatever time I get out of here today, we're going to drive straight to take me home, get my suit. We're going to Chris's wedding. I'm going to do that wedding, then I'll just go home. By like 6:37 a.m., Leanne was calling Chris saying, Todd's not going to be at your wedding. So mentally, it was difficult because the thought of being, for lack of better words, mortal, because you just see yourself as kind of immortal up until something brings that mortality to light. I've never had a surgery before. Never. I'd had my wisdom teeth removed. That's it. I went home that day and dug flower beds at my house. It didn't bother me. It wasn't a big deal. I broke my foot in high school, and I broke a small bone here in my leg a few years ago playing soccer in a game that I probably shouldn't have been in. But outside of that, I've never really had any issues. If there's a 24-hour bug, I get it for 12 hours. I get over things pretty quickly. So mentally, it was pretty tough. Spiritually, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Okay. We'll get into that a little bit more.
So after that heart attack, did they send you home? You stayed till the next morning at least?
Yeah, so I was actually in the hospital for a couple of days after the heart attack. They sent me in. Let me tell you how it worked. UT Hospital, and by the way, my insurance changed in January, and I had to go to UT's medical system. I used to be with Summit Medical Group, and I loved my doctor. I chose my doctor because of his work with diabetes. He was a believer, absolutely loved him. And I was very upset that I had to switch to the UT Medical Group. In retrospect, God is so good because he knew exactly what he was doing. So Leanne said, what emergency room do you want to go to? We always go to Park West, but I said, we better go to UT because I know it will be in network. And let's make this as cheap as possible, right? In retrospect, as cheap as possible is I've met my out-of-pocket for the year. But we go to UT Hospital, and they're doing work on the emergency room, so you can't just walk into the emergency room. You have to be dropped off in the little circle park where the fountain is. And they're supposed to have people there to wheel you back if you're going to the emergency room. Well, for whatever reason, when I got there, they didn't have anybody out there. So I go on this walk to the emergency room. It's probably at least 200 yards down this hallway. And I'm walking down this hallway, and I literally have the thought to myself, I'm not going to make it. I've made it this far, and this is where it's going to end, right here in this hallway. I passed a booth full of people that worked at the hospital. Some of them were the transport people that were supposed to be out front, and they were having conversations, and they just watched me go by. I know the look on my face said I was in distress, but they didn't say anything. So I walk on to the emergency room, and I go to the check-in desk, and the lady's having a conversation with a police officer, and I let her finish her conversation. She looks up at me, because at that point, I'm still thinking they're going to send me home, you know. That's a lie. I knew at that point I was having a heart attack. By the time I got there, my chest was so tight, felt like someone was sitting on it. The pain had started to radiate up into my jaw. It was fully down my left arm. So I was hoping they were going to send me home, but in the back of my mind, I knew what was going on. And so she turns around, she says, can I help you? I said, yes, I have tightness in my chest, pain down my left arm, it's going up into my jaw. She said, what's your birth date? I said, 7/13/74. She said, what's your name? I said, Todd Halliburton. She said, you're going to walk over to that lady right there. She's going to take you back. The nurse met me across the room, took me back. Within 90 seconds, I'd already had an EKG. They said, we're going to send you up for a heart cath. Sent me back to Trauma Bay 4. And on the way back, the sweetest little nurse said, we're going to be doing a lot of things to you when we get back there. And it's going to be overwhelming. But it's precautionary, most of it. So just relax. It's going to be okay. Well, my blood pressure at that point was, at one point it was over 200, over like I don't know, I can't remember, 140 or something like that, 160, something like that. And they start prepping me. The little guy comes in, sticks all the little things on me, and then says, these won't stick, I'm going to have to pull them off. And honestly, I'm in a pretty good mood. Like, shockingly, I'm in a pretty good mood. I keep telling them, whatever you got to do, it's fine. It is what it is, whatever you got to do. And so he said, I'm going to have to pull these back off. So we had to rip every one of them back off. And he said, I'm going to shave you. So I shaved my chest. He shaved half my chest. He starts putting, at that point, they weren't really concerned about how it looked. So he starts putting them back on me. And then he says, I can't get some of these to stick. I may have to pull them back off again and shave you again. And I was like, whatever, man, whatever. He didn't. He got them to stick. And they go get Leanne. They bring Leanne. Leanne had to park the car. She's expecting to see me in the waiting room. They bring her back, and they tell her, the backside of his heart's a little angry. We're not sure what it is. At this point, one of the ER doctors had convinced me that maybe it was my blood pressure that was causing it and that I wasn't having a heart attack. Within 15 minutes, they got me up in the heart cath lab. Again, God's provision. They roll me in, and as they're getting me down the hallway, a guy meets me, and he starts pulling the bed in, and he says, hey, Mr. Todd. He said, we've already heard all about you, and we're going to take good care of you. And I thought, what is he talking about? Come to find out, the nurse who was on that night and in the room was a young lady that Leanne and I used to work at the Disney store with. And she said, it's going to be okay. I'm the one administering your medicine. You're not going to remember anything, right? And I don't. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The pastor at Sevier Heights is about 7 weeks in front of me going through this very same process. He had a heart attack after a Sunday service, had open heart surgery, and he's dealing with this. And he did something very similar to this when he came back. And I watched it last night. And because he and I have met in cardiac rehab. And our stories are very similar, very similar. And so I just wanted to hear what Tim had to say. And he says that during his heart cath, he said, I wasn't really aware, but I could kind of feel some of it. I don't remember nothing. She took care of me, all right? Matter of fact, I was told Dr. Raj Bajapali did my heart cath. And I told everybody, I told Olivia, I told Leanne, I said, if I don't think Dr. Raj even spoke to me. I said, I don't think I could pick him out of a lineup. I don't remember what he looks like. And Olivia was like, he did speak to you, but I did my job well, and that's why you don't remember it. And so they actually kept me for about, 4 days in the hospital. Again, I could be a little wrong on the days there. And I know I'm going long on this answer, but kept me for about 4 days. And during that time, my recovery was fast. It was good, but I was given a lot of conflicting information. Take care of yourself. Don't just sit around until your heart surgery, but don't be too active. Don't get your heart rate up. Don't get too excited. I know you're watching the Olympics, but maybe you should watch somebody besides the USA. If your heart gets out of rhythm, you won't make it to the hospital. You're okay to go home. This is the information I'm getting, all right? So it's very conflicting. It's very confusing. And again, God's provision. God gave me some great nurses. 2 in particular, one named Sydney, great young lady, believer. Had her for 2 nights, I believe. She was just great. And she would talk frankly to me, and she would encourage me. And then Kate. And Kate was a godsend. She not only would explain things to me, she would not only make me feel better, but she became my advocate because there was a disconnect between me and the doctors. I loved my doctors, but I was having trouble expressing my thoughts to them in a way that they understood. And so she began staying in the room when the doctors would come in. There was one time in particular that she was in the room. She turned around to walk out. One of the doctors walked in. She just spun around and came back in and stood against the counter. And I said something, and the doctor kind of answered it, but not in a way that was answering my question. And Kate just said, I think what Todd is trying to say is. And she was just a true godsend. After 4 or 5 days, they did send me home. I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't come back to preaching. Again, God's provision. We already had all 4 Sundays in August covered. We were already doing a special event throughout August and had that covered. And that's just God's provision. And so they sent me home. I couldn't lift anything over 10 pounds. Still can't lift anything over 10 pounds. They really want me to keep it under 5 pounds. I've not hardly lifted anything, done anything. I can't hold Suede, my grandbaby. My wife literally had to take care of me, every aspect of taking care of me now for, well, some of it I've just been able to start doing again myself. And she has been fantastic, but they send me home, and basically it's just you need to wait. We're going to do your surgery in in a month. And don't get your heart too excited. That's basically it. And so my life went on hold for 4 weeks. I would get up and walk a little bit, but other than that, I just kind of hung out in my house in my own little world. And that was pretty much it. Yeah.
So before your open heart surgery, you had to go and stay for quite a while prior to. Can you tell us a little bit about that stay and why you had to be there so long prior?
Yeah, so I told you guys I was on Brilinta, which is they tell me it's the best blood thinner on the market. They price it that way. But Brilinta has a 5-day, well, they call it a 7-day, but it's a 5 to 7 day washout. They can't do surgery, as you know, when you're on blood thinner, because they have to cut you open and you would bleed out. With Brilinta, they have no way of reversing that. They just have to let it wash out. So they luckily they didn't tell me early on, but late in that week before, I had to go in the hospital a week before. My surgery was on September 4th. I had to go in the Wednesday before. It's Wednesday, September 4th. I had to go in the Wednesday before. Later in the week, the doctor told me, I mean, if you had gone into cardiac arrest, we would have just had to find alternative ways of keeping you alive until we were safe to do surgery. I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't know that before this, man. Also, I don't like to know things. I get wigged out by stuff. I don't like shots. I don't like having blood drawn. I don't like any of that. Got over a lot of that. But I don't like to know information. So right before I went into the hospital, I told my surgical PA, I told her, she said, I guess Dr. Dieter went over everything with you about what he'll do. I said, no, he didn't. And that's really okay with me. I don't need to know. She was like, okay, and then proceeded to tell me everything they would do. I didn't know they were going to I didn't know I was going to be intubated and have to breathe through a tube. I didn't know that. I was like, okay. I didn't know I was going to have chest tubes. I was like, okay. She stops with all of that. Dr. Dieter comes in and he's explaining it. Dr. Dieter's my surgeon. He's amazing. Fantastic. Again, God's provision. Love the man to death. He's an interesting little fella, but love him to death. I told him my last day in, I said, if this is my last time I see you, I just want to say it. He said, nope, we don't say it. He said, we still got a long road. We got 3 months ahead of us. He said, you could say it at the end of all of it. So I said, fine, I don't appreciate you at all. Get out of my room. And he said, you learn quick. And he said, you're going to be all right. And he walked out. He tells me in the process of that last meeting with him before I go into the hospital, and again, I'm sorry, I'm going through a lot, but he tells me that's when we'll stop your heart. And I said, I'm sorry. You'll what? And he said, we have to stop your heart to do the surgery. We can't work on a moving heart. He's like, but you'll have a machine that'll keep the blood circulating, a machine that'll keep your lungs going. We walked out there, I looked at Leanne, I said, they're going to stop my heart. She said, I knew that. I was like, because she likes to know everything. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I have this week in the hospital, right, where I'm not really sick, but I'm on a floor with everybody that's gone through what I'm about to go through. So it's a very unique experience because I'm watching people and I'm actually finding a lot of encouragement because I'm like, man, they're doing really well. Like they're doing really, really good. But I'm like, this stinks, you know? Leanne and I jokingly called it our grippy sock vacation because they put grippy socks on you when you go into the hospital so you don't slip and fall. We call it our grippy sock vacation. And we literally thought we were going to go in and I was just going to lay around. We were going to watch movies and stuff like that. And the first time I get there, they start putting IVs in. And I was like, whoa. I'm not here to get anything done. And within like the first 3 hours, they had done all these tests and all. I was like, wow, this is not a vacation, right? Like they're preparing me for something. And I began to get real down, honestly. And as Leanne will tell you, there came a point where I began to kind of question, like, well, what is this all about? Like, why? Why am I here? Why is this happening? Why is this going on? And I want you to understand, it's okay to ask the question why. A lot of people are like, man, you can't question God. Asking God why is not questioning God. All right? Asking why is a legitimate question. When something goes wrong, we ask why. When our car breaks down, we ask why. Why did my car break down? That's how we identify what we can fix. It's okay to question why. God does not get upset by that. He is not offended by that. He does not get angry over that. But as an old song says, when you can't trace his hand, trust his heart. The problem comes in when we begin to doubt God's goodness, God's omnipotency, and God's provision. right? So it's okay to ask the question why, as long as we're doing it from a standpoint of, I want to understand my situation. Why is this happening? Why is this going on? And I began to have some dark moments of, why me, Lord? Why me, right? I'm a type 2 diabetic, the only one in my family. Right? I had a heart attack. While I was in the hospital the first time with the heart attack, one of my doctors comes in on like my second to last day, and she says, you know that those heart attacks you see in television shows and movies? And I said, yes. And she said, that's what you had. She said, it was a big one. I was like, oh, I didn't know there were variations of them, but apparently they are. Because one of my arteries was 99% blocked. And the reason they didn't do the open heart surgery is because they didn't think that artery would make it through the surgery. So they stented it and then scheduled the surgery after my heart had healed. So I started to question why, and I started to openly talk to Leanne about it, because one of the things that Leanne and I came up with was, throughout this process, we're just going to be brutally honest with each other. We're going to tell each other everything we're experiencing. Because it helps you cope to talk it out. So we were real honest with each other. And so I told her, I said, I just don't understand. It's tough. And I get out and I take one of my walks. And I meet this young man. He says, hey man, how's it going? I said, it's going good. Because when people would ask me, that's what I'd tell them. I didn't feel bad. I was okay with where I was at, even though I was having questions. And I said, how are you? He said, I'm fine. And we get to talking, and it turns out that he'd been there for several weeks. He had had valve replacement. It's a mix of people on my floor that had open heart cabbage like I had, and people that had valve replacement for the most part. 7-heart UT, they are beautiful. And so I said, well, what? I said, I had a heart attack. What was yours? And he said, intravenous drugs. He said, I blew out my heart valve. I was in a hotel and blew out my heart valve. And he said, I finally called the ambulance and got here. He said, I don't get to go home until the end of September. I was like, man, what the heck? Right? Like, why is that process so long? Well, they couldn't send him home with prescriptions. So he had to stay in the hospital. And I left there and I told Leanne, I said, I have questions for him. There's so much I want to say to him, right? Like, I want to go on another walk. I want to see him. I want to say things to him. I know God's put him in my path. I never got to have another conversation with him. Apparently some things went south with him. He survived, but he never got out and walked again. Every time I'd walk by his room, he was asleep. And one night he checked himself out and left. So I was like, okay, God, you brought me here. You brought me somebody. I messed that one up, right? I didn't ask him the questions when I had him in front of me. I was like, so what is it from here, Lord, right? Like, what's the purpose from here? What am I going to do? What am I going to say from here? And God brought a gentleman in my path. Leigh and I were walking, and his name is Scott. He was outside of his room, and he asked us some questions, realized that we hadn't had surgery yet. We asked him some questions. We realized that his wife, Suzanne, had had surgery. Dr. Dieter was also her doctor, so we talked a little bit about it. And then every day when we went by, we would talk. And walked by one day, and he says, how you doing, Todd? I said, I'm doing good, Scott. And he says, I said, how's your wife doing? How's Suzanne doing? Because it becomes a little community up there. And he said, she's doing good. He said, you want to come in and see what it looks like on day 2? Like, see how she's doing? I was like, absolutely. So we went in and talked for a few minutes and found out about the church they attend, and found out a little bit about Scott's salvation story and what they're doing now. They're part of a grief program at their church, and they serve in a couple of different capacities. And I just asked them before I left. I said, could I pray with you guys? Told them about me and what I do. I said, can I pray with you guys before I go? They said, absolutely. So we prayed in their room. We were going to put some pictures up today, and we ended up deciding not to. I told Leanne, I said, I just don't want to put any pictures up. But Leanne took a picture of us praying in the room. And so I began to think like, okay, God. Then I began having conversations with nurses, right? Nurses that were finding encouragement, nurses that were telling me their story, nurses that were talking about opening up about where they're at in life and everything. And I started thinking, okay, all right, I get it now, God. I know why I'm here for a week, God. I know why you put me on Brilinta, right? And you took care of it, by the way. I only had to be on 1 month prescription of Brilinta because I'm not on it anymore. They got me on a different medicine that's much cheaper. Because they don't want me on Brilinta because if something happens in the future, they need to be able to do surgery. I thought, I know why you had me on Brilinta because it put me here for a week. You put me in the young man's pathway next to me. I messed that one up. You put me in Scott and Suzanne's path. You've put me in these nurses' paths, right? And then the next day, I'm walking along, and I pass Scott. I say, hey, Scott, how you doing? He said, I'm doing good. He said, have you met Don? I said, nope. He said, Don and Sabrina. He said, they're over in room, I forget what it was, 718 or something like that. He said, Sabrina had surgery. He said, they're really stressed out. They came and asked me to pray with them today. He said, I did. He said, I told them you were a pastor and you'd come by and see them. I said, got it. So on my next trip around, I go and I knock on the door. And I thought, man, I'm knocking on somebody's hospital room door. I don't know them. You know, I'm about to walk in, just be like, hey, Scott sent me, right? Which is exactly what I said. Are you Don? Yeah. And she was downstairs. Sabrina was downstairs getting some testing done. And Don begins to tell us his story. They're from Union County. Struggle, right? I won't go into detail because I'm hoping, Don, I'm hoping you'll watch this. But some of the things he told us, we were just like, okay. So I said, Don, can I pray with you? He said, yeah. One of their biggest issues was the finances of it. It's like, I don't know how we're going to pay for it. I said, Scott, the hospital will work with you. They will forgive some of this. They may forgive all of this. You got to talk to them. He said, can you come back when Sabrina's here? Talk to her about it. I said, yeah, of course I will. She came back by a little bit later. Prayed with Sabrina. Gave him some phone numbers, some contact information for financial services there at UT Hospital. And said, you just got to call him and talk to him, right? And 2 more times, Don showed up in my room. Once, he's like, hey, just pray. Will you just pray? You know, just pray for this particular thing. And the next time he showed up, he said, hey, brother, we're going home, right? They're sending us home. And she had some issues. She had had some issues before this. She had some issues while she was here. She had some inflammation around her heart, some things like that. And he came to tell me they got to go home. And I knew then why he had me there. One part of our process in that week too was Leanne started making all of these scripture cards. And we hung them up. And I would read through them over and over and over again while I was listening to music. And right there, Psalm 94:19. 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of sound mind. Isaiah 26:3, you will keep me in perfect peace, those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Psalm 16:8, I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. Because honestly, in the first 5 days, I wasn't fearful at all. But in the last 2 days, it got pretty tough. And on the night before, and I'll talk about this in just a second, but on the night before, Leanne started pulling these off the wall one at a time, reading them to me and then handing them to me. And I just sat there and went through them. So we can talk about that in just a second. By the way, if you want to see it afterwards, this is a pen that Scott, who I met, carved out of olive wood from Israel. And he has a business that does that. I've got his cards here if you're interested. He came and found me before he left. He said, we're getting to go home. I just wanted to give you this and tell you thank you. So God knows what he's doing. Go ahead. Sorry.
So can you tell us more about the day leading up to and day of your surgery?
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of try to go through this quick because we still got several questions to get through. And it's already, guys, I'm sorry if we're going to go over today, and I apologize. The day leading into surgery, the night of surgery, was probably the toughest 24 hours of my life, in all honesty. It got real quick. I told my wife, I said, I don't want to see many people this afternoon. I want to see my kids. I want to see my kids' spouses and significants. I want to have dinner with them, and that's it. And it was brutal. We had dinner, we had fun, we laughed. But at the end of it, I had to have a serious conversation with my kids. Conversation I didn't think I'd ever have to have. But the conversation went something like this: it's going to be okay. Whatever happens, it's going to be all right. And I don't want you to be angry if it doesn't go the way we want it to. I told them that I loved them. I told them that the Lord loved them. And I told them that we have trusted God to this point and we're not going to stop. So whatever happens, happens. And you all need to understand, I had an incredible peace the entire time. I was never, God gave me such a settled peace about things. But I didn't know what was going to happen. It wasn't peace because I was 100% confident I was coming out of this. It was peace because I knew God was in control of it. Because I honestly didn't know if I was going to see my wife and my kids again. And so I'm dealing with all that emotion, you know. And my kids leave. We pray. We love on each other. They leave, and then it's just me and Leanne, right? And I got to do these 3 showers. They call them showers. They're not showers. I got to do these 3 pre-surgical showers where I have to scrub down with this stuff. And then I knew the day nurse had told me, then I get in and I rinse off, right? But the CNAs that were in charge of me, who, by the way, the first CNAs that I have when I walk into the room are Johnson University graduates that I know. My CNA after my stint was a Johnson University graduate that I know. And so God was just all over this. However, they tell me that I don't rinse off. And that first few hours after that first one was miserable. So on top of all the emotional stuff, I'm sticky and I'm itchy and all of this. Luckily, the next 2 I got to shower off. It was much better. But I'm going through an emotional roller coaster. I don't really get to sleep much because I have to do a shower at midnight. I have to do a shower at 4 in the morning, and then they come about 5 and they take me off for surgery. And Leanne and I have a serious conversation, and I tell Leanne some things I've never told her before, and tell her the same thing. It's okay. Whatever happens, you know, it's okay. Be happy. Live life. Trust God. It's going to be all right. And we pray. We listen to music. She just keeps playing music for me, right? Keeps playing music for me. And there's one song in particular that I'd never heard going into this, and it resonated so much with me. And it was so funny because Leanne and I we started watching the video of Tim from Severe Heights 2 nights ago. We finished it last night. We were sitting around the fire out in our backyard, and Tim talks about how important music was to him. And then he says, while I was in the room for my stent, I got my phone in, and I was playing a song, or I was playing music, and they said, do you want us to put that over the loudspeaker? And he said, well, if it's not offensive to anybody. And they put it on. He said, while they're doing my stent, while they're telling me I'm going to have open heart surgery, because they ended up not being able to do a stent for him. They had to do open heart surgery a few days later. He said, this song is playing, and he played a little bit of it. And I immediately began crying. Because it was the exact same song that spoke so deeply to me. So I wanted to share a few of the words with you. They say, when my heart is racing deep inside my chest, when I'm underneath the weight of anxiousness, when my fear is raging and I can't catch my breath, I will remember
you are faithful still. You have carried me through deeper waters, walked beside me through the fire. You have closed the mouth of bigger lions, conquered even greater giants, gone before me, and you always will. You are faithful still. Then he says this, God, you saw this long before I ever knew. And your peace is waiting here to see me through. My deliverance is only found in you, so I will surrender. And then it has a little bridge. Leanne wrote down all of these. I'm not going to lie to you. She wrote down every verse. She was like, hey, if you want to write some down, she had to leave me for a few minutes once in the hospital. And she said, if you want to write some verses down, I left a pen and some cards. I didn't write down one single verse. Guys, I'm not going to lie. But I wrote down this. I have a hope. I have a future. I am a child of the mountain mover. And it just says that over and over and over again in that song. And that became my mantra. I have a hope. I have a future. Whether it's here or in eternity, I have a future. It's been guaranteed. It's been promised. And I am a child of the mountain mover. So anxiousness is running. I'm trying to put it aside. Leanne and I are having serious conversations. She's loving on me. They come to get me to take me to surgery early that morning, 5:30 maybe. At that point, it's full on. My legs won't stop shaking. I can't get my legs to stop shaking. I'm such a nervous wreck. I would go so far as to say I'm terrified at that point. And Leanne prays with me, tells me she loves me, and off they go. They cart me out, and it becomes a thing. I will say this before we get to the next question quickly, because again, guys, I'm sorry, I know we've gone over. I got to the emergency room. I got to the pre-operation room. Great people, so sweet, but they're all busy. They're working, right? They've got a job to do. Their job is to get me prepped for the biggest surgery I'll ever go through in my life and to keep me alive, right? And I appreciate them for it so much. And there's people all around me, but I've never felt more lonely. They were all there for me, but none of them were there with me, right? And I'm laying on that bed, and they're talking at me, and they're talking over me, but they're not talking to me. And all of a sudden, standing next to me is Ralph Norman. Because Ralph is the surgical nursing coordinator in the operation room, and he's on duty. And he comes and says, hey, buddy, how you doing? I don't know how long he stayed, but I know this much. From the moment he got there, I don't remember a time without him there, because I was under before he left. He looked at me and said, we got the A-team for you today. You're going to be good. You're in good hands. And I'm so appreciative. I called Ralph about a week after my surgery. Woke him up. He swears to me I didn't. I did. And I just said, hey, man, I just want you to know I love you and I appreciate you. And you meant more to me in that moment than you'll ever know. And, went to surgery. Didn't know if I was going to make it. Didn't know if I was going to wake up. I told my wife, I said, I just want to wake up and see your face. And I remember getting to see my kids and her as they rolled me into surgery. I was out of it, but not under yet. I don't really remember much, but I do remember seeing them. And then I went off to surgery. I woke up in the ICU, the heart ICU, cardiovascular, CV ICU. And I remember looking up at Leanne after they had finally, I woke up a few times and the intubation tube was still in. Leanne was there holding my hand. I remember when they finally pulled the tube, I looked at Leanne And all I said was, I made it. I made it. And yeah, that's it. A few more questions, guys, I promise.
So what has been the toughest part since the surgery?
100% the mental side of it. 100% the mental side of it. It has been the absolute, they can't prepare you for that. The mental side of it is so difficult. You probably are familiar with this too, right? They keep telling you you're good. They keep telling you you made it. They keep telling you all these things. But your mind is just terrified, right? You're just waiting for something to go wrong. I spent 4 weeks waiting for my open heart surgery, expecting a heart attack, right? Because they told me that was the outcome if I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And so I spent that time. And then immediately it starts. You know, I'm in the ICU, and they've taken the breathing tube out, and I'm breathing. I'm either asleep or I'm awake for just a little bit. I would wake up and they would have me do something. They would have me blow into the little breathing apparatus, or they would have me, do some kind of test. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was excelling at it. No lie. I'm not saying that to be funny. I was excelling at it. So much so that they moved me out of ICU probably before they should have. I was killing my steps, but I would immediately go back to sleep. And when I was awake, it was very difficult. Like, breathing was hard. I had to force myself to breathe. And I looked at Leanne at one point. I couldn't talk a lot, but I looked at Leanne at one point and I said, I'm tired of breathing. And she was just like, you're doing good. You're doing so good, right? Because she thought I meant it's hard to breathe. It's not what I meant at all. What I meant was I'm tired of having to do it. And it would be easier if I didn't. That's honestly where my brain was, right? This is too hard, is what my brain was telling me. And so I would go back to sleep because I didn't have to make myself breathe if I was asleep. It just happened, right? And so the mental side of it, the fear of the heart, no matter how long they tell you, your heart's good, we fixed it, right? It's good. The fear of the chest healing, because they literally, for those of you that don't know how it works, and I'm sorry if this is too much information for you, but if I have to know, everyone has to know. They literally cut your sternum in half, and they open it up, and then they wire you back together, right? Somebody asked me the other day, well, when do they take the wires out? They don't. They stay there forever. One of them told me if you go through a metal detector at the airport, it should be fine, but if it does go off, just show them your scar. They'll be okay. And you're constantly afraid that you've done something to mess that up, right? You cough too much. You accidentally push up with your arms. Anything can cause it, right? And I went through weeks of just telling them, I think I messed up my chest. I think I messed up my chest. Come to find out through cardiac rehab, everybody thinks that. Every person there has thought they messed up their chest. But 100% the mental side of it, finding myself crying, finding myself wondering what my self-worth is, having to have my wife carry everything and open the doors and all of those things that I do for her, and she's having to do them for me, they'll steal your self-worth and dignity real quick. So the mental side of it definitely has been the toughest side of it. Yeah.
So where are you at in your recovery process, and what do the next steps look like?
Yeah, so I'm not back. I'm still not cleared to be in the office and working every day. I am cleared to preach, but I have to monitor myself, take care of myself. She'd probably be mad at me if she knew I was up here this long. But I'm still in the healing process. They call it a 3-month process. I'm 6.5 weeks into it. 3 months fully for it to heal, really a year for them to be 100% comfortable. The biggest thing right now is my sternum. I'm doing really well in cardiac rehab. My blood pressure is always good. My heart rate's always good. They're increasing my workload. One thing that a lot of people don't know is while I was in the hospital with my heart attack, we scheduled a 5K in Disney for February. Because I was like, I'm running that 5K. By golly, I'm doing it. And so I told my doctors, expecting them to tell me I was crazy, and they were like, that's a great goal, right? I told my rehab therapist, they were like, we'll get you there. This is great, right? So they're increasing my workload every day. I see there's only 2 or 3 of us that are my age in cardiac rehab. Everybody else is quite a bit older. There's that I know of in the few groups around me. There's myself, Tim from Severe Heights, and another gentleman that I see in there. But let me tell you another really cool part of the story, and I wish he didn't have to go through it, but let me tell you another cool part of the story. Every day when I go to cardiac rehab, some of you will know him, some of you won't, but every day when I go to cardiac rehab, as I'm getting done, he's getting started, we get to sit and have a conversation, and I get to sit and talk with Wiley McCroskey every day, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, because he went through a heart valve replacement in between my heart attack and my open heart surgery. And so we're going through this journey together, right? And he said it to Leanne the other day. He said, it's just neat that we get to go through this together, right? We get to support each other, encourage each other. So I'm adding more to. I can drive now for a few miles. I can go to Walmart near my house or something like that. And so I've graduated to the front seat, because you also have to ride in the back seat at first because of the airbag. So I've graduated to the front seat. The next steps are just continued cardio rehab and increase my ability to do daily work. And then at the end of my 3 months, I'll be cleared to go back to life as normal. Yeah.
So you mentioned normal. What does normal look like when you get through?
So from an activity standpoint, I should be back to where I was before the surgery. Honestly speaking, better because my blood's flowing through my heart, and it wasn't. My blockages were 99%, and then 3 more at 80 to 90%, and then 1 more at 30%. The 30% is still there. They didn't do anything with it. They felt it wasn't dangerous. I thought I was going in for a double. I ended up with a triple bypass. They took a vein from my leg, and they took the behind the mammary in my chest. That one's a lifetime. It won't wear out. The one in my leg, there's some question as to how long it lasts, but it's more limited than the mammary. They wanted to take from my arm. They couldn't. They have to do a test. It wasn't able. It's the next strongest. So they had to take from my leg. And so from an activity standpoint, I'll probably be better. After my stent, I looked up the doctor and I said, I feel better. I feel better. And what I meant was, I'm not as tired as I was before I got here, right? So I do feel better in that way. From a physical standpoint there, I've had to change my diet. I'm on a heart-healthy diet now. The average person eats between 15 and 20,000 milligrams of sodium a day. They want me to keep mine at 1,500. Being also a type 2 diabetic, I was losing weight like crazy at first because I was trying to do both diets, and I couldn't keep on weight. I lost probably 12 pounds, and my regular doctor said, just focus on the heart healthy, be cognizant, be aware of your diabetes, but you're back on metformin, let it do its job, and just get healthy. And so, but from a physical standpoint, I should be good. Mentally, that's another story, because for a while, I'm just going to be waiting to have another heart attack. So, yeah. Aren't I, Tommy?
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to skip one because you pretty well hit on the recovery portion. So what aspect of this has been harder than you initially expected?
The mental side of it. Yeah. That is so, I can't stress enough the brutality of the mental side of it. And I just want to encourage you all that whatever you're going through, talk to somebody. If it's not a professional, talk to your spouse, talk to a friend, talk to a parent. Just that conversation is massively important. And Leanne has been with me every step of the way through this. And I can't applaud her enough. But those conversations have been the difference. Also, this is my stack of cards and notes that I have. These were hung in my my hospital room, and as I got them at home, they were hung in my house. We just took them down this morning so I could bring them. For everyone that sent me a card, multiple cards, wrote me a note, whatever, thank you so much. These, you never know how much these mentally pick you up. Most of my life, I've never written cards. I've never written notes. Boy, I've missed out on being a blessing to people because these have been massively important. But yeah, mentally, 100%, most difficult part of it, and unexpected. So, yeah.
So what aspect of this has been easier than you initially expected?
The physical recovery.
Yeah.
Physical recovery's not been bad, guys. My first 2 weeks at home, I was like, man, my first week at home, I was like, I'm never going to get better. I'm never going to get better. It's never going to happen. My second week at home, I was like, I'm feeling all right. If you had told me that I would ever feel the way that I do right now, 6 weeks ago, I would have told you you were mentally unstable and you needed to be checked in. But I really feel good, and the physical recovery has been good, and been quicker than I expected. But the physical is also accompanied by the mental, and so that gets you down. But the physical recovery has been much, much easier than I expected it to be. I really thought that would be the difficult part. I didn't know my brain was going to cause me so many problems. Yeah.
So last question I have is, how can we as a church best support and serve you in these next steps?
Just keep doing what you've been doing. Just keep praying for me. I appreciate the phone calls, the text messages, the letters, the notes, the visits. I appreciate all of the things that people have done for us, the meals. We don't need any more meals, by the way. We're good. I didn't say that to be like, we could use some meals. Things are getting pretty slim at the house. We have been more taken care of in that way than we could possibly know. And some of you that have reached out to me and helped me and provided for me, I know you're going through your own trials right now. And yet you were taking care of me in that process. And that, I appreciate that. I really do. Just keep praying for me. Be patient with me. I put on a good face. And you're going to think he's 100% fine. And why isn't he in the office all the time? Why isn't he here? Why isn't he there? It's still a process. Even though I feel so good, it's still a process. So I'll be here on Sundays. I'll be preaching. Don't expect me in the office for the next few weeks at least. They're not going to even clear me to be in the office. So just be patient. Understand that I will shake your hand, but I'd prefer not to hug right now because people can't judge how hard they're hugging you sometimes. And so I'd prefer not do that, but I will shake your hand. I will fist bump you all day long. But, I'm limiting physical touch. I got a hug the other day, and my wife looked at me and she said, I'm jealous. I don't even hug you right now. And they got to hug you. And so just be patient and just keep praying for me. And as I just figure all this out as we continue going forward. So I'm so appreciative. I'm so thankful for everyone that spoke here. And weren't they fantastic? Like I told you last week, I was like, man, they're not going to want me back, right? By the way, my college soccer team, they're having the best season they've ever had. I said, they're not going to let me come back. They're going to keep Courtney as the head coach, and she doesn't want to be. I'm thankful to everyone that came in and spoke. I'm thankful to my dear friend Scott Carter. He is such in demand as a speaker. And he was like, I have days in September, you can have them all. Immediately without me even asking him. I'm thankful, just as I'm closing, I'm thankful for my wife. She has been so fantastic through all this. Couldn't have made it without her every step of the way. I'm thankful for my sister who took time away from her life to come down and stay with me, sit in my hospital room, all that. I'm thankful for my parents who were right there with me, and my kids who loved me through this, even though some of them don't come to see me as often as they should. I'm thankful for them. I'm thankful for Jeff. We all know that Jeff, he's gone through his own turmoil. And yet he came to see me in the hospital after my heart attack, and this was his words, because you all know Jeff and his sense of humor. He walked in and said, "Well, Tag, I'm it. It's my turn now. We got it. Don't worry about it." And I haven't had to worry about it. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm thankful for the fact that in the midst of it, we sold that property and paid off the building. Come on. How does that happen, right? There's so many things that I'm thankful for during this time and this process. And that sounds so weird to say, but I am blessed. I am thankful. And I know that God has been with me throughout this entire process. And I can see his hand in so much of it. And so when people ask me, how do you feel about all this? 100% honesty. All I can say is, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. Yeah, I had a heart attack. I'm alive, right? I listened to my body. Always listen to your body. Don't ever take it for granted. Men, don't take it for granted. Don't just go, it'll be all right, I'll sleep it off. You won't. Because if I tried to sleep it off, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. So listen to your body. Listen to your heart. Listen to your mind, right? Take care of yourself. Guys that drink energy drinks, cut them out. Throw them in the garbage. Pour them down the sink, right? Get rid of them. Take care of yourself. Take care of your body. Take care of your spirit. Trust in the Lord because he is faithful and he is good. And I'm just glad to be here. And Derek, I appreciate it. I thank you for being up here. Guys, I'm sorry. We've gone way over, so we're not going to get to questions. But if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I'll be happy to answer them. If you want to come find me and ask me, I'll probably just come sit down on the front row. And I'm happy to answer anything that you have that you want to question me about. Outside of that, thank you so much. I'm just going to pray for us, and we're just going to go home. Thank you for sitting patiently. I appreciate you. I love each and every one of you. And this is my story. Scratch that. This is a chapter in my story. Next week, we're going to talk about your story. So be here next week as we continue on with our series, Our Stories. We talk about your story and the power that your story holds in the lives of others. Let's pray. Jesus, we are so thankful for you and that you love us, you look out for us. We thank you, Lord, that long before I was here, you saw it. You knew it. So thank you, Lord Jesus, for that. And Lord, I ask that my story, this part of my story, would resonate with some people. Maybe help them through, Lord. Maybe help them to see your goodness, your provision, your mercy, your grace, your power, your omnipotence. And Lord, I pray that through it all, Jesus, that they would see you are God. And Lord, they would see that your salvation that brings us the peace and hope that I experienced, Lord, that it's available to all who trust in you, find forgiveness from sins in you, find salvation from you, and therefore find peace in you. And so we thank you for that, Lord Jesus. We ask all this in your precious and holy name. Amen.
Once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us on the podcast this week as we dissected God's Word from our Sunday sermon. If you would like to hear more, you have an opportunity to listen to a follow-up podcast that I do with Luke Daly called After the Sermon, where we take aspects of this week's message and we just go a little bit deeper. Maybe we broaden the discussion, maybe we dive into some new scripture, maybe we look at some new aspects of it. We'd love for you to check that out. You can find it right here on this same podcast page, After the Sermon, with myself, Todd Halliburton, and Luke Daly. Again, thank you for listening, and we hope that you have relationship with Jesus. If you don't, he wants relationship with you more than anything. We'd love to help you out. You can find contact information for us right here on the West Lonsdale website, westlonsdale.org. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see you on Sundays if you're in the Knoxville area and don't have a church home. Worship every week at 10:15. Thanks again for listening.